Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare.
What should be our consciousness or mood when we're taking some service or responsibility to present the message of Krishna consciousness, or to whether speaking, singing, leading, acting on behalf of our disciplic succession. What should we be doing? In what consciousness should we be in when we're taking that service? I want to start with two passages from Srimad Bhagavatam. One of them is from where I've been recently reading, in the 3rd canto, chapter 6, specifically text 36, but the scene is Vidura is inquiring from Maitreya, and Vidura, as we know, is in his own right very qualified. But he's honoring Maitreya as more qualified, and he's hearing from Maitreya. So Maitreya knows that Vidura is very qualified, so qualified that Krishna himself, before leaving this earth, thought of Vidura and requested Maitreya to convey to Vidura the teachings that he heard in Uddhava Gita, because Maitreya was also present when Krishna spoke to Uddhava. So Krishna gave Maitreya that service, and that was his mood. Simply presenting what Krishna had asked him to present in a mood of service. So after some time, after Krishna left, Vidura met Uddhava. He inquired from Uddhava. Uddhava responded, and then sent him to find Maitreya. Because although Uddhava was certainly qualified to speak, there were two things. Krishna had given him some other service. Krishna had given him the service of going to Badrinath and associating with the devotees of Naranarayan Rishi, and giving to the devotees of Naranarayan Rishi Krishna's association through Krishna's instructions. The second reason was, so Uddhava had some other service, but Uddhava was deferring to one who by age and by ashram was superior to him, or Varna was superior to him. So Maitreya is very elderly, he's very qualified, you should go hear from him. And then Uddhava left. So under the advice of Uddhava, knowing that it was Krishna's instruction that he do so, he sought out Maitreya, he found Maitreya, and he presented many amazing questions before Maitreya, and Maitreya was responding. And after Maitreya was responding, Vidura has some deeper questions or further questions on the answers given by Maitreya. Uddhava, Maitreya says, O Vidura, who can estimate or measure transcendental time, transcendental activity, and transcendental potency of the gigantic form manifest by the internal potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, speaking about the Virat Rupa. Then he says, in spite of my inability, whenever I have been able to hear, and whenever I could assimilate, I am now describing, in glorification of the Lord, by pure speech. For otherwise, my power of speaking would remain unchaste. I like this verse very much. Particularly the way that Srila Prabhupada explains it. So, one way of understanding, a more direct way, or apparent way, of understanding what Maitreya is saying is, I've heard, and my capacity is limited. But in speaking what I've heard, I can only speak what I've heard. And so I won't speak anything else other than what I've heard, because to speak anything other than what I've heard would be unchaste to the person from whom I've heard. So that's clear, that's a direct meaning. So our responsibility is not to create something new. Our responsibility when speaking is to represent that which we've heard. In the purport, Prabhupada is explaining, it's not possible to remember everything that you've heard from your spiritual master. And nor is it necessary to remember and repeat everything that you've heard from your spiritual master, otherwise you get an F in your exam. That's not the standard. But that whenever you speak that which you've heard only, and not otherwise. For doing otherwise would be unchaste. But then Prabhupada gives a separate meaning, and that is, he speaks first about impersonalists. One of his favorite topics is helping us dismantle the misconceptions of impersonalism. So one of the misconceptions of impersonalism is, there we go. By the presence of consciousness, the presence of the transcendental soul is verified. Conversely, as soon as the consciousness leaves the body is not active. Consciousness is perceived, therefore, by activity. That's easy. The soul is present in the body, so because the soul is present in the body, we perceive consciousness, and the soul leaves and we don't perceive consciousness. Soul is perceived by consciousness. And consciousness is indicated by certain symptoms or activities. The theory put forward by empiric philosophers that consciousness can enter into an inactive state and remain inactive is proof of their poor fund of knowledge. So, in order to become God, you just stop activity. And by stopping activity, you become God. It's like, so karma sannyas. Take sannyas, stop activity, and you become God. Voila. Actually, you're God. You just forgot. And the way that you remember that you're God is you just stop activity. Stop mental activity, stop physical activity, stop all types of activity, and you're God. Voila. But Prabhupada's point is the soul is active, and the soul is conscious, so you can't stop consciousness, and therefore you can't stop activity. Now here's the unchaste part. If the activities of pure consciousness are stopped, certainly the conscious living force will be otherwise engaged. Because unless one is engaged in the consciousness, he has no standing. So you have to be doing something, you can't do nothing. To do nothing is not possible because the soul is active and the soul is conscious. So if you stop the activities of pure consciousness, then you're unchaste, is the way that Prabhupada is explaining this. Consciousness cannot be silent for even a moment. Therefore, Maitreya is saying that in order to avoid unchaste conscious activities, he was trying to describe the unlimited glories of the Lord, although he did not have the ability to describe them perfectly. So there's the do and do not. With every injunction there's a prohibition, Prabhupada has taught. So what we do not is speak something other than what we've heard, because for doing so it would be by doing so it would be unchaste. And what to do to be chaste, we speak always that which we have heard. For if we were to stop speaking, like Mona Vrata, we're stopping the activity of pure consciousness. And that's unchaste. Because the soul is conscious. The soul has this relationship with the Supreme Lord, and you fail to act in your relationship with the Supreme Lord, you're going to act in your relationship with something else, and that's unchaste. So as the speaker Maitreya in this case, he's feeling the responsibility of being chaste, being faithful. I must speak something. I don't have the capacity to speak what you're asking. But I have heard something, and I have understood and assimilated something of what I've heard, and so I'll express that. Although I don't have the capacity to express the unlimited, because I'm limited. But it's being chaste if... Where's our questioner from? I'm being chaste if I'm making the effort, as Krishna instructed me to do so, to express that which Krishna taught, although I haven't understood it completely. At least he's speaking in that way. And I haven't assimilated it completely, and I'm imperfect in so many ways, but it would be unchaste of me to not act to my best capacity in pure consciousness. And that best capacity is the cultivation. This is Krishna consciousness in Rupa Goswami's language, the cultivation of those activities which are pleasing to Krishna. Anukulyena Krishnanushilana, acting in such a way that we're following the activities, not imitating, but following the activity, anushilana, of those who are in the perfected stage. Having heard, I'm acting as a service unto someone far greater. Another example that we heard just the other day was Lochandas Thakur. And his position, very, very firmly, very clearly, I am the servant of Narahari Thakur. He is my master, and I am his servant. And under his direction, I'm writing a book. He wasn't acting independently, he was acting under the order of, and under the instruction of, and under the guidance of, and under the supervision of, and as a servant of, as an instrument of Narahari Thakur. And he had no interest in moving from that position whatsoever. That's who I am. That's the standard, or that's the consciousness that one should be in when representing the transcendental message of Krishna consciousness. There's a very wonderful section also that I'd like to read where Sukadev Goswami is being... Well, there's several places in the Bhagavatam where the same idea is presented, that Sutta is being asked by the sages to speak, and before Sutta speaks, where does his consciousness go? like I was saying the other day, when you're faced with some obstacle or you're faced with some attachment, first thing, check in with reality, like, who are you? So the first thing that Sutta does is his thoughts go to Shukadeva Goswami. Before he even speaks in response to the questions asked by the sages, his thoughts, his consciousness, his own identity as a representative of Shukadeva Goswami goes there firmly. And he offers his obeisances and prayers to Shukadeva Goswami. There's many passages like that in the first canto. The qualifications of a speaker, the qualifications of a listener, one who becomes familiar with the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, or the whole of the Srimad Bhagavatam, but it's repeatedly there in the first canto because it's setting a foundation. The speaker sees himself as a representative of, or an instrument of, those who he has heard from. That's essential. To think otherwise invites pride immediately. Then the qualification is not from some other source, the qualification is me. I'm smart, I've studied something, I read something, I learned something, and I'm speaking something, and the kartaham iti manyate doership mentality invites pride. It's the breeding ground for pride, and that's a disqualification for speaking. Let me spend a minute or two looking for this nice passage where Sutta Goswami, Maharaj Parikshit is asking Shukadeva Goswami about the process of creation. How does the Supreme Lord create? O learned Brahmana, you know everything because you are without material contamination. Therefore, whatever you have spoken to me appears to be perfectly right. Your speeches are gradually destroying the darkness of my ignorance, for you are narrating the topics of the Supreme Lord. Then he asks his questions about creation. And because Maharaj Parikshit is Maharaj Parikshit, he's not one of us, he's a highest standard of devotional service. He certainly knows the information part of what he's asking. Please describe the process of creation. But he wants to know not just like the technology of the thing or the information part of the thing, but he wants the realized soul, Shukadeva Goswami, to impart the realization within his heart. He wants that kind of exchange with Shukadeva Goswami as far as the process of creation is concerned. When Shukadeva Goswami was thus requested by the king to describe the creative energy of the personality of Godhead, he then systematically remembered the master of the senses, Sri Krishna, and to reply properly he spoke thus: Let me offer my respectful obeisances unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who, for the creation of the material world, accepts the three modes of nature. He is the complete whole, residing within the body of everyone, and his ways are inconceivable. I again offer my respectful obeisances unto the form of the complete existence and transcendence, who is the liberator of the pious devotees from all distresses, and the destroyer of the further advances of atheistic temperament of the non-devotee demons. For the transcendentalists who are situated in the topmost spiritual perfection, he grants their specific destinations. Let me offer my respectful obeisances unto him, who is the associate of the members of the Yadu dynasty, and who is always a problem for the non-devotees. He is the supreme enjoyer of both the material and spiritual worlds, yet he enjoys his own abode in the spiritual sky. No one is equal to him because his transcendental opulence is immeasurable. Let me offer my respectful obeisances unto the all-auspicious Lord Sri Krishna, about whom glorification, remembrance, audience, prayers, hearing, and worship can at once cleanse the effects of all sins of the performer. Let me again offer my respectful obeisances, and again unto the all-auspicious Lord Sri Krishna, the highest, the highly intellectual, simply by surrendering unto his lotus feet, are relieved of all attachments to present and future existences. Without difficulty, they progress toward spiritual existence. And he goes on. His mind is very clearly fixed on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He gives an answer to Maharaj Parikshit's question in the form of fixing his mind upon the personality of Godhead by describing the qualities and position and compassion of the personality of Godhead. He describes how he does the process of creation, how his creative energies are working. It's out of his reciprocation with the living entity's desire for a type of enjoyment, a type of existence that's separate from him, which is not possible because there's nothing that's separate from him, but because that's desire, he, the most compassionate Supreme Lord, extends his creative potency and thus permits the living entities to enjoy. But the point I particularly appreciate is it's just verse after verse after verse after verse of fixing his mind upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Not just giving an informational answer, but fixing his mind upon the Personality of Godhead and showing the unfolding of the Lord's energies out of his compassionate nature, reciprocating with the living entities. The contrast is, in the spiritual realm, he's also reciprocating with the living entities. But because the living entities are not ill-disposed towards the Lord, the reciprocation is experienced differently. They're experiencing his internal potency as opposed to his external or creative potency. But then, because of his great compassion for those living entities that have turned their attention away, he enters within that very realm that he creates for their illusory happiness and reminds them, shows his wonderful pastimes, gives teachings of the spiritual realm so that they can again become attracted to that natural position of happiness in the spiritual position. A characteristic of a qualified speaker, which we may or may not have, or we may have in degrees, but a standard is the same standard as they're receiving. Because of an eagerness to receive, one's mind becomes fixed. And when one's mind is fixed, then one has the capacity to present simply that same transcendental message in a transparent way. So that's another qualification of, or another way of saying the qualification of when what you should be looking within yourself when ever called upon to present the message of Krishna, that you present transparently. With not only the purpose of the audience in mind, the purpose of that spiritual message is for the audience to come to the position again where their consciousness is upon Krishna, but that will be most successfully accomplished if one's consciousness is fixed upon Krishna. The purpose of the transcendental knowledge, I'll say it again, the purpose in a different way. The purpose of transcendental knowledge ultimately is to come to the position of full shelter in Krishna. Not just to solve a problem or to minimize suffering or to experience relief or to get some object of enjoyment or get some liberation ultimately. The purpose of transcendental knowledge is to come to the position where there's full shelter in Krishna exclusively. Mam ekam sharanam. That's the objective. And so a speaker, ideally, is in that consciousness or striving for that standard where Mam ekam sharanam. The shelter, let me simply be an instrument of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Let His will be done through me as an instrument. Just like Ramananda Roy was saying to Lord Chaitanya, my tongue is like a stringed instrument, and you are moving the stringed instrument. Because of some desire in your mind, my tongue is moving. And I don't know why, except that you have something in your mind, and you wish to communicate it, so you're doing it through my tongue. Now that's like very exceptional. But that's the will of the Supreme Lord, a desire of the Supreme Lord is being fulfilled through us as an instrument. Just like the voice is an instrument. The mridanga and kartals and harmonium, they're an instrument, but the voice is also an instrument. And through that instrument, the holy name is coming. Or through the instrument of our power of speech, the message of transcendence can come. Like Prabhupada said on several occasions, my speaking may be imperfect. Much like Maitreya was saying. My speaking may be imperfect. But if I'm speaking the words of a perfect person, no, correction. I may be imperfect. But if I'm speaking the words of a perfect person, my speaking is perfect. If we're acting in the mood of, in the consciousness of, we're an instrument of the will of the Supreme Lord. Krishna will be pleased if his message of Bhagavad Gita is spoken with as much fidelity as is in my power to do so. Let me present it transparently. That should be the mood of a speaker, a singer, a leader, a servant, a person who's carrying out some function on behalf of Krishna in relation to others. We're but a nimitta matram bhava savya sachin in the language of Bhagavad Gita. Krishna says to Arjuna, my dear Arjuna, become my nimitta, become my instrument. This is a technical word in Sanskrit. There are different causes of creation, and one of the causes of creation is a instrumental cause of creation. So when we're representing that message which we heard, that should be our consciousness. Just as Arjuna, when you're fighting, don't think you're a mighty hero, you're going to do it, go ahead Arjuna, you can do it. Like we often think about ourselves. Especially devotees that from childhood have heard from their parents, you're very smart, you can do it, get those best grades, you're the best student. Oh, you didn't get the best grades, what's wrong? You're the best student, and the psychology that becomes ingrained from the material perspective is simply apply yourself and you can do anything. And if you didn't get that anything, it's because you didn't apply yourself. So you're admonished for not applying yourself diligently enough. It's competitive spirit. It's completely material consciousness. And spiritual consciousness has a whole other set of rules. It's simply being an instrument. There's not a diminution of effort, but the effort that's made is to act in a way that Krishna will be pleased, that Krishna's will be manifest. And if Krishna's will is not being manifest, it has to do with my insufficient purity. And so the effort goes to purity, not just trying harder. It's a very important lesson in devotional service. One very nice medium for learning that lesson, from my experience and from what I see happening in the lives of others, book distribution is a very wonderful medium for learning that lesson. Where if you're in the consciousness of being the doer, everything is terrible. And if you're in the consciousness of being an instrument, everything's nice. Whether the results are there or the results aren't there. And same, the converse. If you're in the doership consciousness and the results are there, it's miserable. I mean, there's some happiness in I've achieved something, but it's not happiness. It's misery. Because the next moment when it isn't happening, then you're miserable. So it's actually just a trick of Maya. Very nice medium of learning humility, or being the non-doer, that Krishna is the doer and that you're the instrument. But I'm sure that we can all, from our own services, I can say from the position of being speaker, as part of my service, when the mood is, there's this wonderful message, let me simply be an instrument to convey this message, make Krishna empower this capacity. It's like Prabhupada's arrival prayer. I don't have, Maitreya is saying the same, I don't have the capacity, but let me make some effort because it's a service that's being asked of me. I'm sure Govinda can say the same thing from Kirtan. If, just practicing and learning melodies and da-da-da-da-da-da, it's not satisfying and it doesn't move the hearts of people. But when the mood is, all of that's gone, and it's just glorifying the holy name, it's a whole other realm. And that's the consciousness we should strive for. Now this question earlier, what if we're not in that consciousness? What if we acknowledge that we have pride in the heart and we have these shortcomings? Take up that, the answer, or one response is, take up that same activity, vigilant that there's this tendency for pride in the heart, withdraw consciousness, don't give consciousness to that voice of pride, rather give attention, invest consciousness in striving to be simply an instrument of Krishna. Let Krishna be an instrument and Krishna can use the instrument as he wishes. And stay in that consciousness. And it's sublime. Even striving like that, it's sublime. Whether it's book distribution or cooking or deity dressing. Someone can do deity dressing. Oh, so nice. Instead of thinking how the deity will be, or Krishna will be pleased by being decorated very nicely, one can be thinking very prideful. I can dress the deity very nicely. I want to take a nice picture so I can show it to people how nicely I dress the deity. It's the same thing, but the consciousness behind the activity can be impure or pure. And the standard of purity, or standard where our ego is not getting in the way of the service that we're doing, is that Krishna is to be pleased. And we can find this in this, you can look at it later, it's Canto 2, Chapter 3, where Shukadeva Goswami is answering his questions. And it's verse after verse after verse of just glorifying Krishna, fixing his mind on Krishna. And through the medium of glorifying Krishna, fixing his mind on Krishna, the answer is provided without losing his Krishna consciousness. It becomes ecstatic rather than static. We're hearing about many, in the course of this yatra, we're hearing about the lives of many very, very elevated devotees. Their personalities are unique and different. Their way of conveying Krishna and Krishna consciousness unto the lives of others is unique and different. But each of them, there's great transcendental inspiration from within. And it comes out. What's the criterion or the eligibility for getting that inspiration from Krishna from within? What will inspire Krishna, attract Krishna to give inspiration unto the heart of his devotee? We can see in the lives of these great personalities something that's consistent, and that is that they're completely humble. That is to say, the negative is they're devoid of pride. Or the positive is they see themselves as the servant of some wonderful personality, their spiritual master, or Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, or Krishna, or combination. Because of that, just like with Ramananda Roy, because of his mood, Lord Chaitanya was exhibiting to the world the topmost levels of spiritual understanding. Prior to that and since that time, there's no such understanding to be found anywhere. And the exhibition of that in the life of Lord Chaitanya and his associates. Their humble mood of service is incredible, fully matured, and to the degree that position of humility becomes firm and matured and very, very deep, unlimited inspirations, and through their medium, their writing or their singing or their making biographies of Mahaprabhu's life, or whatever their service is, the instrumental service that Lord Chaitanya has given for them, they exhibit that in a superlative degree. So that's the inside, there's this humility, and then their behaviors on the outside, it matches. When Ramananda Roy came before Lord Chaitanya and paid his obeisances, Lord Chaitanya asked, "Are you Ramananda Roy?" "Yes, I am your servant. I am low-born Shudra caste." He just come on procession with 1,000 people, and brahmanas and covered palanquin, and speaking in that very humble mood, offering respects to others, amanina manadena. And Lord Chaitanya then expressed his purpose in coming. Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya has sent me just to hear from you, Krishna Katha. And consistent, Ramananda Roy's reply, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya has given his favor to me. He somehow sees me in a kind manner. Therefore, he's showing his kindness upon me by sending you. Just consistent expressions of offering respect to others without any expectation or any consideration of respect for oneself. Simply in that humble service mood, unlimited inspiration can come. Somebody was asking, we're hearing about these wonderful devotees. Is it possible these very advanced stages of Krishna consciousness is something that we might experience in our lifetime? This isn't storybook time for children. This is inspiration from our acharyas to carry us to that position. The potency is there according to our eagerness for it. The potency is there to carry us to that position. So when having received mercy, it's then incumbent upon us to exhibit that mercy or display that mercy or utilize it, free from pride, in a mood of service, simply as a carrying forward the same mood and the same message. I'll end with this, thinking of a same message where Prabhupada said it in a different way. It's a nice warm day today. In our temple in Brooklyn on Henry Street, it was a hot summer July in New York City. Morning class, Prabhupada was saying in a very humble way, midway through the class, one same point that one can become Krishna conscious by receiving mercy from a qualified soul. Prabhupada expressed that my spiritual master, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he found me in a dark place. And by his kindness, he has given me mercy. He has made my life fortunate. And he then instructed me, you go to the Western countries and you make them fortunate. And everyone went, Jai Prabhupada. And then Prabhupada said, and now I'm requesting all of you, you go forward and take this same good fortune and you make others fortunate. Jai Prabhupada. But one can think pridefully something. That's not going to, in that consciousness one isn't going to be able to receive that which Prabhupada came to give, the good fortune. Nor can you have the capacity to distribute it to others. The capacity Prabhupada exhibited in his own words, that I was in the darkness of ignorance, and my spiritual master found me in this dark place and has somehow made me fortunate. That's our situation. And we're enjoined to extend that to others. This is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mission, and it's our method also of becoming more qualified ourselves. Again, the question, I don't have qualification. what do I do? Become qualified by recognizing the qualification is absent, but let me, instead of thinking of myself in a prideful way, let me strive to act as the servant, the representative of our disciplic succession, and thereby please Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and our disciplic succession. I mentioned this before. When we were having the initial kirtans in Vishakhapatnam, and very nice visits to places, and very nice kirtan. When we went to Simachalam, my comment was, it's like being in Vrindavan, because, and I was thinking specifically, the years that Govinda has spent in Vrindavan with Indra Prabhu in the 24-hour kirtan program, and being trained by Indra very, very carefully, and receiving the training that Indra has given very carefully, and then going to various places, so that those places, the persons at those places, and we ourselves can also be benefited. And if that's the mood that's being carried forward, to the extent that that mood is being carried forward, that's Vrindavan. And that's the purity, the transparency of that which has been received is being distributed. And our lives in the Krishna consciousness movement are like that in so many ways. They're persons who have received the message of Krishna consciousness from, persons who have trained us in Krishna consciousness. And the message itself, if we exhibit that message itself by our qualities, it's very powerful. We'll have the opportunity this afternoon to go on Harinam Sankirtan. And I know for a fact, because we received feedback for the time that we were in Puri and had Harinam Sankirtan in Puri, it was powerful. I mean, it was wonderful for the devotees, but those who saw so many devotees having Harinam Sankirtan together, it was meaningful. Spiritually uplifting, adding respect and appreciation to Srila Prabhupada and his work, as well as people directly hearing the chanting of Krishna's holy name. So just flashing back to when we first began this yatra, there's an opportunity, as we're becoming purified and benefited, of doing some service as we're moving about, by our qualities, by our conduct, by our chanting, by good behavior, Vaishnavachar. So let us become instrumental in our chanting, speaking, behaving, acting, serving. That should be the mood and the consciousness. So, any discussion on this, or again, anything that from our prior topics? Oh.
Raj, on the topic of being chased to Srila Prabhupada's method of presenting Krishna consciousness, on the topic of being chased to Prabhupada's methodology of presenting Krishna consciousness, and also the tendency of finding new ways of presenting also Krishna consciousness on the thought of times are different, times are changing. Specifically, I'm thinking on Harinam Sankirtan, the presentation of the holy name, chanting. There's a big tendency right now that we see in our ISKCON society that there's all this finding different ways of presenting the holy, well, not even the holy name, but presenting Krishna consciousness. How does that fall into that discussion of being chased to Prabhupada's way of doing things? Prabhupada had a very specific way of broadcasting Krishna consciousness, especially in the West.
Whatever works. You judge a thing by its result. Is Krishna consciousness being produced? So, if is Krishna consciousness being produced means, the whole picture. Meaning, like what's wanted is, yes, that persons become attracted to Krishna's holy name, but they may have a very, very different idea about Krishna's holy name than the devotee who's chanting Krishna's holy name. So, in other words, teachings need to go along with the chanting of the holy name. And so as long as the basic elements are there, the chanting of the holy name and the teaching of our position as Krishna's eternal servant and so on, and engaging all of our activities in Krishna's service, then you'll get the result. So whether the form is like this or the form is like that, having innovative ways of form is fine as long as substance doesn't change. Or I'll be even more specific and say, I don't think that Harinam Sankirtan, as we're going to be doing at 4:30 till 6 in India or the West, is going to have any different impact today than in the 70s. At the same time, there may be other ways of presenting the holy name that will attract people that we didn't consider at the time because the times were different, and to attract people in that method is fine too. Provided it's not just showmanship and etc., etc. It actually results in people coming to the position, accepting their position as Krishna's devotee. And while there may be, I'll make a social comment, and while there's a strong disposition to do like that in the yoga circuit in particular, I don't see many devotees coming from that. And those that are very active in it say the same thing. So, while it's an interesting strategy, let's see the result. Doesn't mean don't do it. It means if it's going to be done, if one is going to take up creative ways, let it be done in such a way that it results in bhakti awakening within people's hearts. Is that... When bhakti awakens within people's hearts, it'll be exhibited by their qualities and their submission and their service. Okay, Narada? Ji, pass it back.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna Maharaj. In continuation with Mataji's question and what you mentioned in the class.
Relatives? That one? Go ahead.
I have a struggle, like, in
You got a tough situation.
yes, with relatives and like it's like I feel scared, like, in the, going in their zone, thinking that I have to compromise my own standards if I just mingle with them or go into participate with them. And now there is a struggle, like, they really see me as someone fanatic or doing too many things. So how can I apply that being an instrument in that zone? Because I try to stay away from them and compromising. I have to compromise this, and they will be having so many questions. And
It's not just questions. In your case, in particular, it's they have expectations. Jump that high so many times. And if you don't, you're not a good relative. Go ahead. Plus the other part that you mentioned, conversation about things that have zero interest for a devotee. Just like abjectly mundane stuff, and that's all there is. I mean, I don't know about that part, but that's common. I don't know about that part in your particular situation, but to some degree that's common. And I can speak for myself. I don't want to take part in that stuff with relatives or anybody. And because they're relatives, I'm not obliged to take part in it because they're relatives. And if that makes them uncomfortable that I don't want to take part in that, that's not my problem. I'm not going to take part in it. I can be polite, but I'm not going to take part in it. If that means for your relatives, oh, you're a fanatic, well, maybe we should associate less. And that's kind of happening in your life anyways, as it's happened in mine. No, I guess I can get away with it better because I'm a sannyasi, although they don't know what that means. They don't have a clue what that means. They just understand I'm deeply devoted. And I'm not going to change that because, they have their expectations. Or they think I'm a fanatic or something. It's my life. And you can accept this is my life. Or not accept this is my life. My family accepts it, they just don't participate in it. And your family wants you to be, mundane or religious but not devoted. Well, that's not you. So you can pray for their well-being and shrug your shoulders and move on. Continue to be exemplary of a gentleman, a very kind, a dhira. Remain undisturbed in those provoking circumstances that they'll throw your way to see, how you're going to respond, and remain undisturbed and carry on. And pray for them. And there's countless, always finite, but like so many living entities that are Krishna's parts and parcels that, given the right opportunity, they'll take Krishna consciousness. That's where your energy goes. This is our family. In the back? Two, way in the back. Put your hand up. Right over here.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
I'm very fortunate to have an association of a lot of devotees, but I'm having a lot of problem being humble. I don't know what to do. I think pride may be the one thing. Can you please guide me? What can I do to improve this? Thank you.
I need the microphone back. Okay. It's not easy. Misery loves company. We discussed this, and you heard. So, remember when Varsada was asking about, we can gradually diminish, or we can get the hammer. So that's one way, but we don't like the hammer. So there's philosophical and there's spiritual solutions. Philosophical has its real efficacy when there's spiritual foundation. Philosophically, what is it that we're proud of? Prabhupada's expression is, a man becomes puffed up by borrowed plumes. Borrowed plumes, like here's a hat, and here's a feather in the hat. And where did the feather in the hat come from? So they slaughtered some bird and put some feather in my cap. And I'm strutting around, puffed up by borrowed plumes. But it came from some other place. So whatever it is that we have pride about, it's something that Krishna has given us. It's not ours, it's Krishna's. And proof is Krishna will take it away. At the time of death, whatever it is that we're proud of, it's gone. If not before then. It's Krishna's. Whatever it is. So let me acknowledge Krishna is the proprietor. That's the philosophical. And when I acknowledge that Krishna is the proprietor, with proprietorship comes enjoying. This is from Ishopanishad. The whole of Ishopanishad, read Ishopanishad, it gives a philosophical foundation about proprietorship. Krishna is the proprietor. Everything comes from him. Om Purnamada Purnamidam. And since everything comes from Krishna, Isavashyamidam Sarvam, he provides us with our maintenance, our means of that which we may become proud of. Krishna provides it. And we're entitled to accept that which is meant for our maintenance and not other things. And that which we accept as our maintenance, it's come from Krishna. It's like, like a child and their parents. The child can be proud of their toy or whatever. But where does it come from? Without their parent, they wouldn't have that toy or whatever that thing is that they're proud of. Their intelligence, their ability, their strength, their beauty, whatever it is, it's come from Krishna. So because he's the proprietor, he's the enjoyer. My position, this is philosophical, my position is to take that something and give it to Krishna for Krishna's enjoyment. That's the antidote for pride. So now back to, well, okay, I accept that, but still the pride is very strong. Tendency is very strong. So if we take the position of servant, here's a list of things that I have some pride in. Make an inventory little list, and make, ones that are really difficult, then ones that are mediocre, then ones that are easy to transform from something that I'm proud in to something that I'm offering to Krishna. And take one of the easy ones and work on it. And that's like going into a forest where there's no path. Just keep walking up and down and up and down and up and down. In time, there's a path. You just follow that path. And it becomes very easy to move. Initially, it's difficult because there's no path. And you get a win or you get a success in something that's easy, then you take something else. Still easy. Then cultivate in principle. This is a sadhana. So philosophy sadhana. And another, you can elaborate on that, but another principle is mercy. Those relationships that you have that are the strongest sources of spiritual strength in your life, strengthen those relationships, because through those relationships the descending mercy will come, where strength greater than your strength will come into your life most effectively, and that will carry you that's a spiritual solution. Krishna, through the medium of those personalities, will lift you up. It's Krishna's strength beyond your own strength. Say it the opposite. Some relationships are there, but if they're not really strong relationships, then it's your own effort. But no, the math is easy. Which is greater, your effort or Krishna's mercy in your effort? The math is easy. So connect with Krishna's mercy through those relationships where Krishna's direction, guidance, inspiration, where Krishna is coming into your life. Turn your attention to those relationships. Ideally, or in principle, that's spiritual master, or those that are acting on behalf of and representing the disciplic succession in some fashion. They may be Vartma Pradarshaka gurus, those are pointing to the path. But those relationships are very important also, or those that guide us in our spiritual life. Strengthen those relationships, and the mercy of Krishna will come more strongly into your life. And add these other features. Cultivate an understanding of the Krishna as the source, and therefore the actual proprietor, and therefore the actual enjoyer of those things. Dedicate those things as you can within your capacity to do so, simply for Krishna's pleasure, simply for Krishna's pleasure, and keep practicing like that. And it becomes second nature. And then the more challenging ones you can take on next. And strengthen the spiritual relationships in your life. Okay. Feedback.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you for your wonderful class. Maharaj, as you said that it's not because of our previous pious deeds that we receive bhakti. It's because of the mercy of some Vaishnava that we receive, and then we proceed in devotional service. I was wondering, Maharaj, that once we receive this mercy from some compassion we get, then then the actual thing starts. Then it is like the ball is in our court and we have to move, or how should we move? Because then there are many things to put into considerations. We have to properly set our motives in coming in devotional service. How should we move? We should increasingly depend on mercy then again, or how?
Sounds like a nectar devotion question. Rupa Goswami has written Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu to address your question. There are things that are favorable, and you apply them. There are things that are unfavorable, you avoid them. And you cultivate the mood of devotion in doing so. Not just doing, not doing, but internally cultivate the mood of devotion. I am doing this for Krishna. I'm not doing this because it's not pleasing to Krishna. So I'm not doing it. And you cultivate the mood of devotion. The standards are found in nectar devotion. They're there. Read it carefully, and even better than read it carefully, discuss in the association of other devotees, how do we apply this? These are some challenges that I'm meeting. And through the association of devotees, the message you'll enter more deeply, and the message will become your life. That's maybe too simple of an answer. It's okay?
Hare Krishna Maharaj. My question is from morning class. We should not hear with preconceptions, or as I know already. But several times it happens when we hear again and again from spiritual master and Srila Prabhupada. So there's few things it happens that few things we know. So what should be the consciousness when we hear it again?
Well, there's ideal and there's real. The ideal is Sanatana Goswami. Sanatana Goswami he had lots of conceptions, vastly learned. But what he did was the ideal. He came before Lord Chaitanya, blank slate. Here's the writing instrument. Please write on me, who am I? Because I don't really know. So that's ideal. Full submission. We're not so qualified. So we like holding on to certain conceptions because we think that's like happiness, and if I let go of that, then I won't have any happiness, and I want to be bereft of happiness, so I hold on to something. And so certain things, just like, Polaroid lenses, certain wavelengths just don't enter. Some of the message just doesn't enter. Keep hearing. And gradually through the process of purification, if one is sincere, that purification will allow other things that you're not letting in to come in. And then you can examine your conceptions against what you've just heard. As you said, hearing again and again. If there's something that you notice that irritates, either something you just don't like, or something that the other side, something that you've captured, but you're not acting on it, but it keeps coming. You hear it, you've captured, you've heard it, but you're not acting on it. Those are areas, those two, where you should pay special attention. It's like, a stone in your shoe. You can try to walk around the stone in the shoe, but at a certain point you stop, take your shoe off, and empty out the stone in your shoe, because it's irritating. And just let it keep going is going to rip your bottom of your foot apart, maybe. So, if there's something, so those two things, something that's like, it just bothers you, and it bothers you, and it bothers you. Don't like just react to it, it bothers you. Look inside and say, this is something I got to pay attention. What's going on in here that makes that bother me so much? And address it. And the other, something that I know I should be doing, and I hear it and I go, yes, and I don't act on it. And it keeps coming and it keeps coming. Pay attention to those two. One of my godbrothers, Vaisheshika Prabhu, has this very nice expression I like, and it's very, very real, very practical. Where attention goes, energy flows. He uses this for increasing book distribution, or anything. But he particularly, he's a book distribution minister in North America, and he's got a really vibrant, congregational-based preaching program in San Francisco area, in San Jose, California. So, but he's inspiring devotees all over the country in book distribution, and this is one of his favorite sayings. Where attention goes, energy flows. So if something's important, pay attention to it. And may not even immediately get worked up, but keep paying attention to it. Don't just ignore it. Keep moving. Pay attention to it. Doesn't mean become obsessed, but pay attention to it. Over a period of time, that something will improve by Krishna's mercy. And you're paying attention to it. Your effort and Krishna's mercy, it will improve. Okay? The same applies for this pride question. The same applies to the question you asked the other day about taking things in a complacent way or familiar way. If you see it's a problem, pay attention to it. Go more deeply. Someone else? Right behind you.
Maharaj, we have been hearing about being situated in one's own position and carrying out the process of carrying out the spiritual activities for elevation. In the case of Kurma Brahmana, Lord Chaitanya did not encourage him to follow him and said, stay in your position and follow the process. But in the case of Brahmanandara, he asked him to quit his position and come and join him. So I'm wondering if the same principle was applied in both situations, and if so, how? Or was it not applied?
Ramananda Roy remained as a householder. He didn't give up his ashram. In Leela, they're eternal associates, very intimate eternal associates. So he brought him into his intimate association and used him or engaged him in delivering messages unto others. When, for example, when Vallabha Charya wanted Lord Chaitanya to hear his messages, Lord Chaitanya, one of the things Lord Chaitanya did was he just referred to all of his qualified devotees. He said, I'm a Mayavadi sannyasi, but there are many persons here in Puri who are very qualified. And Ramananda Roy he referred to and said, he's very expert in Sambandha Gyan, and at the same time, he's very expert in knowledge of mellows of devotional service. I think you should go to him and hear from him, and so on. So, your specific question is, does the same principle apply to Kurma in the case of Ramananda Roy. And I would say in the case of Ramananda Roy, it's unique. As Lord Chaitanya was traveling through all of South India, he was meeting multitudes. One of the persons he met was an eternal associate. So by his specific direction, Ramananda Roy didn't say, Karma Sannyas, I want to come and join you. It was Lord Chaitanya who said, please come and join me, because of his unique position. Okay. And that's where the role of receiving some guidance or direction in life becomes imperative. Anything else? Okay.